Well, hello and welcome. I've got Dr. Rick Brinkman on the line with us today. Rick is the author of Dealing with People You Can't Stand. I worked with Rick many times and am delighted to have you here. Thanks for joining us today, Rick.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Anytime, Mark.
So, Rick, maybe we could start by just telling everyone a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm started out as a holistic physician and naturopathic physician, and next thing I know, I'm counseling my patients, dealing with their mental and emotional issues. For example, I had a patient who had arthritis. She'd had it 15 years, tried everything I'd ever heard of, traditional or alternative, as it was called then, now being complementary. And I figured, well, maybe I should pry into her life. And I find that her husband works for the federal government, flies back and forth to Washington, D.C. from Portland, Oregon every week. She's hated that job for 20 years, hasn't expressed it, wants to support him. When minor upsets would occur, she wouldn't deal with it because they only had 2 days a week together. He was supposed to take an early retirement. He decided against that on his own. She suppressed her feelings about that too. And if you suppress too much somebody you care about, it's going to build up a barrier between the two of you. My entire prescription is to teach her how you can share upset without a person feeling attacked. She did this, and 30 days later, symptoms were gone. And next thing I know, I'm counseling more and more people dealing with their various issues. And I had a person who was depressed, 2 years of psychoanalysis. The analysis, you're depressed. I asked about his present. He said, dead end job going nowhere. I asked about his past. He said, filled with failure. I asked about the future. He said, more of the same. Pretty depressing. Uh, so here for your listeners, here's a quick tip to bum yourself out just in case you ever get too happy. Pick something in your present that you hate and keep seeing it going forever in your future. You will immediately feel bad and drain your energy. But by the same token, if you see the future and how you're going to make it different, your energy is going to change immediately. And with him, I clarified his values with him. We set some goals. We tuned up his self-esteem, made a plan. 2 months later, he quits his dead-end job, starts his own business, and depression magically disappears. So one thing led to another, and before I knew it, I'm going from private practice to public practice, which is what most people experience today in seminars and in video programs and books, etc.
Great. Well, and maybe also, Rick, perhaps tell people a little bit something about yourself that they may not know.
Well, in general, I've done 4,000 programs in 18 countries, but I'm very shy, actually. Not on stage. That's a whole different story.
Right.
But my wife would tell you she has to come to a seminar to hear me speak because if we're in a social situation, I'm going to be a nothing person, I'll respond to people, but I don't really initiate. I was an only child and I'm very comfortable just being with myself. But at the same time, I am really paying attention. I am a listener and I am more curious about people's reality. And so I'm genuinely present with them. But if we were at a party, you'd have to initiate with me.
Interesting. So you're by and large an introvert who chose to make public speaking and performing your career.
Yes, exactly.
Good. Well, listen. Let me segue right into then. What made you write this book?
Well, in the practice, I saw there were some major areas that affect people's attitude, well-being, and that was one of them was, are you fulfilling what's important to you? Values, goals, plans. It's amazing how much energy and low energy and depression cleared up right before my eyes when I helped people clarify that. But the other major thing was people and relationships. That's a huge one. And if you have to go to work every day next to somebody who's always nothing's right, everything's wrong, there's a plan for my life, but I'm not in it, that's going to really affect your health and well-being. You need to give yourself an attitude adjustment to survive it. You really have to question, do I want to stay there too first? But if you're going to stay, you got to give yourself an attitude adjustment. And even better, wouldn't it be great if you could affect that person's behavior? And over the years, along with Dr. Rick Kirshner, we found a model that really made sense and allows people to understand why people are acting the way they do, and then even better, know what to do about it that can affect change.
Interesting. Interesting. I've read the book, and I have to tell you, just as a personal testimonial, Over the last 10 years, I have used a lot of the stuff in the book, the tips, techniques, and the tactics that you use for the 10 personality types. And this stuff does work. But that's my experience. Rick, maybe you could let me know when you wrote the book, what do you hope that people will be able to know or do as a result of having sat down with your book?
Well, I think one thing is to realize it's behavior and that people act in different ways based on two factors. One is context, where are we, what's going on, and the other is relationship, who we're with. So you could know somebody seems to be a bully most of the time at work. You wouldn't believe what a wimp they can turn into in a different context or a different relationship. And that's really important to think behavior, because human beings can only pay attention to seven, give or take, two things at any one time. And it's like a spotlight of conscious awareness. And if we have a part of our brainstem called our reticular activating system, and it's like radar. So if somebody gets married, they see everyone getting married. If they're interested in a certain car, there it goes again. You see it all around you. So the trap with people is, if you think somebody's negative and that's how they are, that's their personality, guess what? That's all you're going to notice. And in fact, you could engage in the strategy for negativity that we talk about in seminars and books, and you could be having an impact. Maybe half the time they actually suggest a solution, but you know what? You won't even notice it. We as human beings are programmed to be right about whatever we think in the first place. So it's like a moat around the secret garden where you can really affect people. And this is how you get past the moat. You realize this is behavior, and behavior is fluid and changing, that the person is capable of a lot of different things, but you don't get to see that because you don't know them and all their relationships and all their, like I was interviewing a CEO of an organization to do programs for her organization. She tells me, oh yeah, she's very much in our lens, the control zone. And if she gets a little too stressed out, she can go tank, which means you just run right over people. But then she says, when she goes home, she becomes a whiner to her husband about the problems at work. Her husband cannot understand. How does she possibly run a company? She's such a whiner. But he doesn't get to see her in her blazing tank glory.
Right.
Even the people you're closest to, you only really know a sliver of what they're capable of.
Interesting. And so by consuming the book, by reading the book, or even parts of the book, you help people understand to separate behavior from personality and cross that moat, if you will.
Yes. And then once you've done that with your perception, you're ready for the strategy. So, for example, with somebody who's whining, they're feeling helpless. They're feeling the victim in relation to either the circumstances, or maybe they feel disempowered in relation to others, or a lot of times it's in relation to their own high standard of what they think should be in this situation and they can't achieve. So, you don't want to offer them solutions, because then you'll actually push them deeper into it. And the goal is to get them to think solutions. But what's going on is they're trapped in their generalizations. Everything's wrong, nothing's right, it's always that way. And you can't problem solve a generalization. So you got to get them to be specific. But then, to be a little more specific, when you start asking questions like, well, what's going on? They'll say, everything's wrong. Okay, what specifically is wrong? All of it. When does it occur? It happens all the time. Who's doing it? Everybody. Now, I know you've heard this. Now, it only takes two or three to make a generalization. If we drive someplace and we stop at two or three red lights, we say all the lights are red. Meet two or three people in a bad mood, everyone's in a bad mood. The generalization point, as we call it, is the etiology of whining and negativity. But it can happen on a much more global level. So when we're asking questions of the whiner, we have to be careful, because after they say two or three generalizations to our questions, we will unconsciously generalize that they're never going to answer my questions, and we'll make the mistake of offering a solution. You have to know at this point what's going on is that generalization stuff, and you're going to outlast them. You're going to keep asking and asking, and if you are relentless, they are going to finally hit bottom with some specifics of a solution. And at that point, we move on to the next step. If there is a solution, you want to get them as actively involved so they have a direct experience of not feeling helpless. If they say, I don't know what to do, what you do is you say, guess, make something up. If you did know, what would it be? And then you give them an expectant look, which is when you just kind of open your eyes and
Right.
stop for a moment. and stare at them. And if you want to have some fun, you get on a crowded lift, pick out a stranger at random, and give them the expectant look. And it's amazing how they suddenly tell you all kinds of things.
They start talking. So, and I can tell again, back to personal experience, I can attest to the fact that that's just one example of somebody who's a whiner, but there are a number of other personality types that we see all the day, like the tank, the sniper, the grenade, the negative person, which most of us have to deal with on a regular basis. The book is chock a block full of these practical and tactical tips and techniques. So that's where now. Listen, Rick, perhaps you can give me a hand in letting people know if they want more information from you, how to get in touch with you. How do they do that?
Well, my website would probably be best, rickbrinkman.com, RickBrinkman. It'll blink because it gets redirected to a new website, but that's the simplest way to get in touch with me.
Great. Perfect. And we'll also put that the link to your website on this as well. So Rick, I want to thank you very much for your time. For anyone who's listening, this is the tip of the iceberg. There's a ton of great content in here, and unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess for you, we all have to deal with difficult people on a regular basis. So there's no shortage of opportunities to practice this. Yeah. So listen, Rick, thanks very much for joining us, and
Okay.
we look forward to working with you again in the future.
Yeah, same here. If I could leave one last tip, remember, life is not a test. It's an actual emergency.
That's wonderful. Thanks again, Rick.